You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Bella Perez Rubio, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode,
It is also imperative that our nation remains intact and inviolable, our sovereignty preserved. We will protect our sovereign rights and preserve our territorial integrity in defense of a rules-based international order. With our national interest paramount, we will always pursue constant dialogue and diplomatic approaches to the resolution of any issue that may arise.
on July 24, 2023, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. gave his second State of the Nation address, marking the first year of his presidency. And for the second time in a row, he failed to mention the West Philippine Sea, the arbitral ruling, as well as our ties with China and the US.
Nung kampanya, he actually said two slightly different things. On the one hand, sabi niya that he wanted to raise our relations with China to a new level, whatever he meant by that. But he also said, I will not give up 1 square inch of Philippine territory. Siyempre, may mga smart aleck dyan na nagsabing, pero inch is a measurement of land, hindi tubig. But still, if we hold the president to the spirit of what he said, then isn't it about time that he unequivocally said he upholds and he recognizes and he will use as our most powerful diplomatic and political weapon our victory at The Hague? Hindi pa niya sinasabi yun eh. That's one thing he could and should say.
That's Senator Risa Hontiveros, sharing her expectations ahead of the president's sauna. But what you heard at the top of this episode was the closest the president came to addressing the West Philippine Sea and our arbitral win. Last year, during his first report to the nation, he also failed to explicitly name the South China Sea and the countries involved in the ongoing dispute there. But he still managed to send a strong message, signaling a break from the previous administration.
On the area of foreign policy, I will not preside over any process that will abandon even 1 square inch of territory of the Republic of the Philippines to any foreign power. With respect to our place in the community of nations, the Philippines shall continue to be a friend to all, an enemy to none. The Philippines has always been open and welcoming to all our foreign friends and visitors. That is our worldview. That is our culture. But let me be clear. We are very jealous of all that is Filipino.
So what does this all mean? I spoke to John Robert Go, an associate professor of political theory at UP Diliman, to find out. Were you expecting him to discuss the West Philippine Sea or the arbitral ruling at the sauna? And what was your reaction when he didn't?
Well, of course, it is expected that he will talk about this because during the first year of his term, a lot of things happened in the region, right? There were a lot of diplomatic protests that were filed by the DFA coming from certain incidents, no? And some of the incidents are really like big news for every one of us, like the use of laser and all that reached the point of summoning the Chinese ambassador to Malacanang. So it's a surprise that he did not bother include this in his sauna.
The laser incident he's referring to occurred between China's Coast Guard and ours in February. The Philippines accused China of aiming a laser at one of its vessels near Ayungin Shoal and temporarily blinding its crew members. The Coast Guard ship was transporting supplies to the BRP Sierra Madre, a Navy transport ship intentionally grounded there in 1999 to enforce Manila's claim.
As the chief architect of foreign policy, the president should be very clear about what he wants to do with all of these issues. I would not be surprised if Duterte was not talking about the arbitral ruling because he wasn't really convinced from the very beginning. But Marcos was banking on certain successes in his assertion of our territory, sovereignty, our rights in that particular area. So the failure to mention all of these things is surprising, if not disappointing. And the discussion on diplomacy was rather sweeping and general, right? He did not even elaborate anything. That could be bothersome.
I've heard previous speechwriters say that, when you're writing the SONA, every word is intentional and not just every word included, but every word excluded. Is it concerning that an intentional choice was made to not talk about the West Philippine Sea?
Maybe it's also a choice made by Malacanang to not discuss it. Maybe they regard the issue at this point a very sensitive one. That if the president would make an explicit statement about the issue, it could really create more problems, especially, for example, remarks such as, I don't know if you remember, but probably people remember the remarks of the ambassador about the 150,000 Filipinos in Taiwan. The president also did not mention EDCA.
In April, Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Wang Silian, voiced his government's discontent at the Marcos administration's decision to allow US troops more access to military bases here under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. Some of these bases will give the US significant proximity to Taiwan. And then, alarmingly, the Chinese envoy said,
The Philippines is advised to unequivocally oppose Taiwan independence rather than stoking the fire by offering the U.S. access to the military bases near the Taiwan Strait if you care about the 150,000 overseas foreign workers.
Here's what Marcos said about it a few days later.
I think there must have been an element of yung lost in translation. English is not his first language, but I'm very interested to know what it is that he meant.
Marcos summoned the envoy to explain his remarks, but what they discussed at the meeting is unclear. Here's Senator Risa Hontiveros again, this time reacting to the president's second SONA.
Hindi nila binanggit ang pangalang West Philippine Sea. Sabi lang nila ulit, sovereignty, through dialogue. Naku ha, baka isang century tayo pag-dialogo sa China. Dinededma pa rin na tayo. Sana, minsan hindi nagawa ni Presidente kanina, sana sabihin nila once and for all explicitly na tinataguyod nila ang ating tagumpay sa The Hague.
More assessments of Marcos Jr.'s policy after a quick break.
The US, especially in this day and age that we are figuring out how to check China in our own waters, the US is our ally. But because of our history as a former colony of the US, it's important to renew and to rebuild that alliance as more of an alliance between equals. Now, the addition of EDCA sites is upon us. So, importante we are more proactive about any gains, especially that the affected local government units may have, but also to preempt any similar harms in the past that may come to them.
Again, that's Senator Risa Hontiveros on our increased engagement with the US under this administration. In April, Marcos took a trip to Washington and became the first world leader to be given full military honors under the Biden administration. He was also the first Philippine president in over a decade to visit the White House.
We need to revive that alliance as an alliance between equals. And it's not just the two of us, the Philippines and the US. Hindi tayo dapat pilitin. At wag tayo papilit, pumili lang between China and the US. No. I've said before, a bigger alliance is a better alliance. So, ipunin natin the growing number of individual countries and regional formations in the world that are upholding our victory at the Hague Tribunal. Just most recently, the European Union. Before them, NATO. Countries like India, Italy. Before that, fellow ASEAN countries that are also, and as of now, more effectively checking China, like Indonesia, of course, Vietnam, even Brunei. And the president has to catch up on this scene.
I think a 7 is a high grade for the president.
That's Julio Amador III, senior advisor at the Waypoints Project, a group composed of maritime law experts. He was speaking at a forum hosted by the group on July 19.
Why? First, there's consistency in the way that the administration has been going about in terms of the South China Sea. It has allowed the appropriate agencies, such as the Department of Foreign Affairs, to regularly make a statement on the arbitration. There are no conflicting messages in terms of our victory in the arbitral tribunal, which I think is quite good.
But for UP Diliman political analyst John Robert Go, the president could stand to be a little more specific.
Marcos is somewhat assertive, giving out statements, but also calculated statements, saying that I will defend the territory, not a single inch of our country will be given up to any foreign entities. But at the same time, he's very silent on which foreign entity. He doesn't really say it is China, for example, that is the one that claims a part of our EZZ. It's still on the safe side. It's not really saying that the other forces are trampling on the sovereignty of our country.
It's especially important to be clear, he added, when delivering your yearly report to the Filipino people.
It could be, on the one hand, an attempt for them to play safe because they don't want more issues to come out. But at the same time, trying to avoid is not really facing the problem. Right? Trying to avoid what were missed leaves the people hanging. So what are the plans? If you're asking what is the state of the nation, he said it's sound and improving. But on this particular aspect, we are not sure if it's actually sound because you're not telling us more about it. Right? You try to be silent and keep information away from the public. Friend to all, enemy to none, right? But I guess that is plainly in terms of rhetoric because you cannot be a friend to all. At the end of the day, you have to take a side, and that would be the side of the Philippines as president of the Philippines. No? So he must be willing to take certain risks by asserting our own sovereignty. Because if he will not take action, the fisher folks in the West Philippine Sea will definitely be affected. May real life implications. So that's what I'm more concerned about. And if I were the president, or if I have the chance to tell the president, you should not risk the livelihood of your people.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. Our executive producer is Jill Caro, and our senior news editor is Veronica Oy. If you're watching this on YouTube and you like this episode, please take the time to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for listening.